beer hats.
Oh, no! Battles deep into the night has left the stadium entirely.
You're listening to the Baumbastic Podcast with Andrew Ellis on Inside Arkansas.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast, presented by Inside Arkansas and hosted by Andrew Ellis, the #1 podcast on the planet for Arkansas Razorback baseball. And it's MLB Draft Day, boys. In just a few minutes, the MLB Draft will be concluded. Round 20 is going on as we speak. There's about, 15 picks left. Hoping that no chaos happens in those next 15 picks. You guys will have to keep me updated a little bit, but of course, we are at kind of the stage of the draft where even if someone does get drafted, it's probably just a flyer, and you'll have to kind of feel pretty good about that. But we got a lot to get into, man, a lot to discuss because a lot happened. In the last 2 days, 11 Razorbacks have been drafted so far. A few possible future Razorbacks were drafted as well. And so we're going to talk about all of that and talk about what it means. We're also going to evaluate how we feel about this thing. As we spoke about on the show the other day, usually going into the draft, we're always kind of worried about one of two things. One, is this draft going to play out perfectly where everything kind of falls in line for us? Or is it going to play out in a way that we're just completely screwed and we don't have any options left? The reality is almost usually in the middle somewhere. And in today's draft, specifically today in the last 10 rounds, there were a couple of things that happened that I didn't like. I didn't think were good, one of which openly surprised me. There have also been some decent positive developments, one of which I really didn't expect and didn't really talk about too much. And so there's a lot to get into. There's a lot of good things that happen in this draft. There's also a lot of bad, or not a lot, but there's also a few things that definitely are going to, create some questions that we've got to answer. And so we're going to try and break it down. We are going to have a reasonable conversation about this because I know it seems like people are very, very heated today, and understandably so in some cases, but I do think it's not quite as bad as some may think. But we're going to break it all down and get into it. And I appreciate you guys for joining me. And like I said, if you see anybody in these next 15 picks get drafted, I do have the draft tracker pulled up. As of this moment, let's see, the last pick was the 600th pick for the New York Mets, who have taken 3 Arkansas Razorbacks in this draft here. Just a handful of picks left, so we'll kind of keep an eye on that. But for the most part, the draft is concluded, and so we're going to talk about it all. The players that were drafted from Arkansas, even the ones that weren't surprising. We're also going to talk about the transfers, some of those guys that got drafted because there were a handful. No high school signings, which is nice. That is a nice little silver lining coming out of this draft. And we're going to get into all the good and bad and get into your questions. This is a live edition, man. So if you need some clarification on how things work or what's going on, or just want to vent a little bit, this is the place to do it, absolutely, and we're going to break it all down. Before we get into the guys that got drafted on the Arkansas side, of course, I want to talk to you about Vici Aesthetics and Wellness, one of our favorite sponsors here inside Arkansas, and your go-to destination for looking better, feeling better, and performing at your best. At Vici, they specialize in the latest peptide therapies, cognitive support, neuro optimization, skin vitality, and anti-aging. They got a wide range of peptides to target your specific goals, whether you may be looking for peptide therapies will support your tissue repair and athletic recovery. They also have advanced aesthetics like Botox, fillers, laser services, and body contouring, all designed to enhance your natural look with real, lasting results. But they don't stop there. They also specialize in total wellness with services like medical weight loss, testosterone replacement therapy, vitamin B, mega burn, and more. All these services to help optimize your energy, health, and confidence. Ready to look, form, and feel and perform at your best? Hit up Vici Aesthetics and Wellness today and tell them the fellas from Inside Arkansas sent you. You can scan the QR code on your screen or text them today at 479-343-8424 or visit ViciAestheticsandWellness.com. Vici Aesthetics and Wellness. Come conquer with us. So what we're going to do first is we're going to just go through the players from Arkansas who were drafted, most of which, honestly, there weren't any massive surprises necessarily. And so we'll just kind of go through these real quick. Ryder Helfrich was drafted 15th overall to the Arizona Diamondbacks, the highest drafted catcher in school history. That is quite the honor for him. The slot value for his selection, number 15 overall in the first round, $5.4 million. Not bad. Pretty decent. Number 27 overall, of course, and this was the first big blow of the draft, Carson Wiggins, who we understood was likely a possibility, even, more likely that he was going to get drafted and that he had thrown his final pitch as an Arkansas Razorback. I don't think anybody saw him going 27 overall. Now, our guy Joe Doyle had reported that he had a pretty high number that teams weren't scared off by, and that there were some teams that were definitely willing to meet that demand. And he had even reported late last week that it was possible that he would work his way into kind of the late first round range. But the first round of the MLB draft is like 40-something picks. It's just kind of one of those weird things. So I thought, like, man, earliest possible would be like 37, 38. Definitely didn't expect him to go over 100 deets, which did surprise me a little bit. But Carson Wiggins, the saga has come to an end. We no longer have to do the song and dance. Wish him well if you want. If you want, don't wish him well, whatever. When he's getting paid, because it's a $3.5 million slot, I actually think he's going to sign for under that. I think he will be an under slot guy that is kind of a quote unquote money saver. But I do think it's going to be well over $2 million. So we'll see what that number looks like. But given what it looks, like it's going to be, hard to honestly have too many hard feelings where it's like, damn, it just kind of played out in a way where I don't really think there was much of a decision to make there. Hunter Deese was the third Razorback drafted, which brings the total of first round picks from the Arkansas Razorbacks in the last 2 years to 7, which is quite the number, quite impressive. Hunter Deese goes number 35 overall to the New York Yankees in the first round, slot value of $2.83 million. Big ups to Hunter Deese, man. This is a dude who, when he first got to campus, it was kind of obvious, like, oh, of course this guy. Like, if I had told you 3 years ago that Hunter Deese would be a first-round pick, you'd be like, duh. I mean, he's 6'6", lefty, throws 98. Of course he'll get drafted in the first round, but he had a little bit of a unique journey to get there. Really glad he was able to put things together in his junior year, his redshirt sophomore year at Arkansas, have the year that he deserved to have and that he had to work for. And he's going to get paid very handsomely. Like I said, slot value of $2.83 million. The fourth Razorback selected was a guy who I would say had what I would describe as a junior year from hell. Like, it could not have played out worse for Gabe Gackle this past season. And that's a bummer for him, a bummer for us, just bummer for all of us, because we kind of had high expectations, hoped it would work out. And I've kind of alluded all year to there being more to the Gabe Gackle story than meets the eye. I will just say, because I think there are a lot of you who, maybe even deservedly so, feel a type of way about the Carson Wiggins situation where you think, man, this guy didn't give us everything that he had trying to make as much money as possible, which he is going to make a lot of money. And so, you can like the decision or not, but I think there's a lot of you, and I'm not even shaming you for it. I think it's fair to feel that way, to be like, man, did this guy really give us everything he had? With Gabe Gackle, you can't really feel that way. If I'm just being honest with you, that dude gave Arkansas everything he had, to his own detriment at times, especially throughout his junior season. He ends up going number 73 overall to the Oakland Athletics, slot value of $1.16 million there. I know his family, I don't know about Gabe, but I know his brother is like a big Oakland Athletics fan. There's like pictures of them in athletics gear growing up, and so that's pretty cool to see that. And speaking of Razorbacks who got drafted by teams that they wore gear of as a kid, Camden Kojal was the fifth Razorback selected. He goes round 3, pick 87 to the Miami Marlins, slot value of $929,000. Awesome to see Cam Kojal sneak into that top 100. I think that was a little bit higher than most projections expected for Camden Kojal, but the dude absolutely earned it, as consistent, as reliable as any Razorback hitter. I think you would be stunned if you put the numbers up and compared what Kojal did at Arkansas to some of the best hitters in school history, whether that be Kerstad, Benintendi, whoever. Like, Kojal's numbers, even with Aviva Aloy, like, they stack right up there with everybody. Really proud of that dude and excited to see what is next for him. Ethan McIlvain was the first selection today, because it was the first 4 rounds were yesterday. So it was like, we felt good about what happened, but kind of tough to tell where you stood with everything because there was so much left to happen. And the day started off very well for Arkansas, with Ethan McIlvain going round 5, 152, or pick number 151 to the Kansas City Royals for a slot value of $476.9 thousand. And so that's 6 Razorbacks selected there. All 6 were guys that you just really didn't even need. Like, there was no real conversation to be had. Would be awesome if they could come back, but you weren't banking on that by any stretch of the imagination. Just made too much sense, especially in McIlvain's case where he had such a good, dominant season. It was going to be hard for him to one-up that. And yet Damian Ruiz was the second pick today, the 7th overall Razorback, drafted in the 9th round, pick number 272 with a slot value of $206.3 thousand. Ruiz was one that I think there were some people who were kind of like, hey, maybe this could work out. Maybe this would be a guy you get back. We always point to the 5-5 rule. Damian Ruiz would not have benefited from the 5-5 rule at all, because he just finished his 4th year of college. So even if he did come back and, like Ethan McIlvain is a guy who at least he was in his 3rd year, you could at least make that song and dance of like, oh, hey, could he come back and still have a year of leverage? Damian Ruiz would not have, by the way. So I think it makes a lot of sense that he, pushed all his eggs into the pro basket. And to see him get drafted 9th round, that's really good. So good for him. That's going to the Cincinnati Reds, by the way, at number 272 overall. And then Kahil Aloy, I would say, was like our first domino, like our first, I want to say surprise, but like a guy that really you could have made a 50-50 argument of like, would he get drafted? Would he not? Could he come back to Arkansas? He goes in the 11th round, pick number 330 to the New York Mets. And every pick after the 10th round has a designated slot value of $150K. Teams can go over that, and oftentimes in these situations, they do go over that. It will count against their bonus pool. But the 11th and 12th rounds are typically like the over slot rounds where you're drafting these guys, planning to pay them over slot. I think Kahil Aloy potentially could be one of those guys. We will see. Then you had Colin Fisher. I'm going to get to the transfers in a second, but then you had Colin Fisher, goes round 13, pick number 388 to San Francisco Giants. Same kind of situation there with the slot value. Tate McGuire, who, as the draft was playing out, I was kind of talking myself in. I'm like, could Tate McGuire maybe come back? He goes round 14, pick number 409 to the Los Angeles Angels. Excited for both of those guys. Then you had Cooper Dawsett, who goes in the 17th round to the New York Mets. Now, he is one that you kind of listed as a 50-50 guy. Given that he just finished his 4th year of college and that he's had some injury issues in the past, coming off Tommy John during the 2025 season, it probably makes sense for him to go ahead and go. Could Arkansas get him back? He's drafted in a similar range to Parker Coyle, who, by the way, we're going to get to in just a second, potentially, but I think that would probably be a little bit of a tough one there. I think he'll probably just go ahead and start his pro career, and deservedly so. Guy chunks, guy throws hard. He was the 11th Razorback drafted, which did tie the program record for draft picks in one season, and that record was broken right after we started this podcast here, because Parker Coyle, with the 603rd pick in round number 20, gets drafted by the Cleveland Guardians. This is the second time that Parker Coyle has been drafted. Of course, got drafted in the 19th round last year by the Brewers, I believe it was. Opted to return to Arkansas for his senior season. And, I wouldn't say had like the best, year where everything played out great for him, but good to see him get drafted a second time, hoping he can make a little bit of money there in his pro career. And so that's 12 Razorbacks drafted. And now I believe the draft is complete. So now we have a little bit better idea. Now there could be some, movement here. I don't know if there's going to be guys that sign free agent deals or whatever. We'll just kind of keep our eyes peeled for that. I will say I did just get a text message from someone connected to the Arkansas baseball program who is pleased with today's developments. So take that for what it's worth. I feel good about it. All good. 12 draft picks in 1 year. That's a big deal. That is a program record, of course. Like I said, I haven't had a chance to like really look at everyone else and see how their draft shaped up. I can't imagine there's many teams that had double-digit draft picks. Maybe a few, maybe a couple here or there, maybe a handful, but I think there's a good chance Arkansas is either first, second, or third in the entire country in draft picks. Now, done pumping sunshine. Let's get to the good stuff or the bad stuff. Let's talk about the disastrous stuff that happened. Arkansas had 3 of their transfer commitments get drafted today, all of which happened after the 10th round. The first of which, I got to be honest, did not see this one coming in any way, shape, or form. Like, I've been talking about the draft, kind of previewing it. And every time we preview the draft, we kind of say, hey, these things, you just don't know how they're going to play out. You never know. This one was really not even one that I was like, hey, let's really keep an eye on this one. I kind of felt pretty good about this guy making it to campus. In fact, so good, I had the dude on the show, Wills McGinnis, who I had a great time talking to and felt great about that chat. And, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not. I hope I don't get in trouble, but I was talking to him after we finished the interview. I was chatting a little bit, and I was like, oh, hey, yeah, I didn't want to put you in a tough spot and ask you anything about the draft or anything like that. And he kind of laughed and was like, yeah, if I got drafted, cool. He's like, but like, I haven't really been getting any calls. Like, I don't think there's going to really be a ton of interest there. And to be fair, you look on all the prospect lists, all the boards, I did not see Wills McGinnis' name, not because he's not a good player, but just because he's coming from Georgia State, had a good year, but a year that I think he can improve on at Arkansas. Kind of, felt like there's a lot he could work on, and that we even talked about some of that on the podcast. And he was a sophomore. He just turned 21, like literally last week. So he was a draft-eligible sophomore, but he kind of checked all the boxes of a guy who would be like a no-brainer to make it to school. we'll see. I haven't had a chance to talk to Wills. It happened today. I'm not going to hit the dude up on his draft day. So I have no idea if he just got like a huge bag at the last minute. I have no idea if the Red Sox maybe just drafted him thinking, hey, this is a guy that we can sway a little bit. I would imagine, I'm going to go out on a limb and say they called him and got an idea of whether or not he would be willing to sign. I also don't know, because there's some transfers in Arkansas's class, a couple of which I'm going to talk about in just a second, that I know for a fact made a fat bag of money. It's to the point where I'm like, two of which, by the way, that are draft eligible sophomores, that I'm like, man, it would almost be stupid for those guys to entertain the draft. There's no way they are signing for more than that. I don't know if that wouldn't apply. I mean, maybe that applies to Wills McGinnis, but I had not heard that. I have no idea what his compensation was going to be like at Arkansas, and perhaps it wasn't going to be a huge amount. I really don't know. I'm going to do some digging in the next few days, but he goes in round number 11, pick 334 to the Boston Red Sox. And like I said, rounds 11 and 12 are typically over slot rounds. Like, teams don't take flyers in the 11th and 12th round. Those are specific because there's like an hour and a half or so between the 10th and 11th rounds. That's when teams kind of reset and start resetting their board and start making calls of like, all right, who are some guys in these next two rounds that we could draft and maybe, cut a deal with. So I have no reason to believe that Wills McGinnis didn't cut a deal. So that one was definitely a little bit surprising to me. Ben Cleary was less surprising because he was the one that we knew. I mean, as a matter of fact, when he committed, I was excited about it. I was like, hey, cool. But I was like, this guy just kind of seems like would be a draft guy. Now, the 5-5 affects things. Seems like he wanted to play in the SEC, but he ends up going round 12, pick 363 to the Cleveland Guardians, which is almost the exact same range that Dylan Grego last year went to the San Diego Padres. And Grego wound up signing for $150K. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's going to take more than $150K to sign Ben Cleary. Because if not, then I would probably look at Arkansas and be like, what the hell? Like how'd you let that one happen? But I would imagine he's going to sign for a little bit more than that. And this is one, again, that is a lot less surprising. Not that we wanted it. We were kind of hoping, hey, maybe you can get him. That'd be awesome. I felt like with Cleary and Dawson Bryce, the Charlotte third baseman, I felt like you were going to get one. I didn't think you were going to get both. And, given that Arkansas added Manny Marin, you could maybe make a case, hey, maybe this is the way it needed to play out, because you've already got your shortstop, all's well there. And I definitely think when they landed Manny Marin, the Tennessee shortstop, I think that was probably their way of telling us we think we have a hole at shortstop, and so we're going to go ahead and fill it. And so from that standpoint, and that kind of leads us to our next part of this conversation, because the big question when you have these transfers that come off the board is, okay, well, who are we going to replace them with? In the case of Ben Cleary, Arkansas has already done that with Manny Marin, who also, by the way, was draft eligible, but a draft eligible sophomore, one you expect to make it to campus. Now it looks like he absolutely certainly will. So in the case of Ben Cleary, we don't have to wonder who the replacement is at shortstop. He has already been added. And so that's some good news there. And then Chris Diaz, the right-handed pitcher from Florida Gulf Coast, one of the top starters in the portal, who I was like low-key buzzing about when Arkansas landed him. He gets drafted in round 14, pick 430 to the Seattle Mariners. And I'll be honest with you, of these three guys that were drafted today, I love Wills McGinnis. I think he's probably the best player overall out of these three. And him being a sophomore, you kind of like the upside. I feel like Chris Diaz is going to be the hardest to replace out of that trio just because of the starting potential and the starting experience. He's got 2 years as a starter. I don't really see how Arkansas replaces that. And so if you want to talk about like big picture takeaways of like things you can be concerned about coming out of the draft, I do think starting pitching is definitely, no doubt about it, one of those. Because, of course, the Wiggins thing played out the way it is, kind of unsurprising there. As soon as the Wiggins news, we got definitive news on that one, I immediately turned my attention to Michael Malkey, the draft-eligible sophomore from California Baptist, the WAC pitcher of the year. And I was like, man, they cannot afford to lose Michael Malkey. They also, in my opinion, cannot afford to lose A.J. Vasco. Good news is you didn't lose either. So I feel like those were the top two priorities in your transfer class, and neither of those guys got drafted. So that's very much a win. I would have really liked to keep Chris Diaz, and I do wonder, because it was in the 14th round, which is kind of in that gray area range where if you're getting drafted in the 14th round, one, you're likely not signing for a huge amount, but it's also like not unheard of for guys in that range. If it were like the 17th round, I would be like, no doubt about it, Arkansas is going to get this guy to campus. 14 is kind of right there in that range where I'm like, I don't know. I'll have to see what the number looks like. We'll also see, because Arkansas was certainly planning to pay Carson Wiggins a lot of money if he wanted to come back. Where does that money go? Did some of it go to Evasco? Did some of it go to Michael Malky? Did some of it go to, I don't know, Manny Marin, Dawson Bryce, Zeb Allen, whoever? I don't know. But I do think the pitching is probably the biggest question mark coming out of the draft, just because I really genuinely don't know what the, and I don't say that like there is no other option. You can find pitchers, but I just personally, as of right now, don't know. Whereas with Wills McGinnis and Ben Cleary, I can give you a pretty good idea of who their replacements are, because they already exist. Manny Marin is already on board. Dawson Bryce is already on board. By the way, Nolan Souza didn't get drafted. By the way, TJ Pompey didn't get drafted. TJ Pompey is one that I really, really did not expect. And so if you take a step back from a big picture standpoint and you kind of want to know, all right, what were the big surprises of this draft? Well, I would say Wills McGinnis getting drafted very much is that. I would also say that TJ Pompey not getting drafted is that. And we can, you can make your debates of would you prefer to have Wills McGinnis, who's a little bit better bat to ball skills, maybe not quite as dynamic, maybe not quite as much power. Would you rather him versus TJ Pompey? I don't know. But for the most part, those kind of cancel out a little bit. And I think that's kind of how I view that. Now, not getting Ben Cleary is a bummer, but also not super unexpected. And so Chris Diaz is really the only, and not that he was super surprising, I feel like now becomes, because if you cancel out McGinnis and Pompey, which maybe some of you won't be willing to do, I think Diaz now becomes kind of the biggest variable of man, that's a bummer. Can we maybe get this guy to, skip out on starting his pro career? And if not, do we have another plan in place? And it could just very well be as simple as, well, we think Cole Gibler is going to be a stud, or we really like Luke Neiswanger, another Baumbastic Podcast alum who is a very projectable guy, was a weekend starter at his previous school. Maybe that's a guy you explore. Obviously, getting Michael Malky back is huge. Real quick, I do want to go through the list of guys who did not get drafted, because it is a decently long list there. The top two, of course, AJ Vasco and Michael Malky. If either one of those guys had gotten drafted today, I would have gone as far as to say this draft was a bad day for Arkansas. I'd be like, man, this did not go well for Arkansas. The way it actually played out, I'm kind of on the fence where I'm like, wasn't good, but also wasn't that bad. I'm kind of in the middle there. TJ Pompey was not drafted. Nolan Souza was not drafted. I think those are not only solid developments just because you would like to have those guys back, but given that Cleary and McGinnis both got drafted, I think those were kind of necessary. You really needed to get at least one of those guys back, and probably both. So Pompey and Souza not getting drafted, very notable. Javorsky Lane Jr., who, it's crazy how I'm at the point now with the draft, you can't take anyone at face value. But when I hear that a high school kid is just dead set on signing, I am no longer believing it, because I heard that all year during Landon Schaefer's senior year. He winds up turning down $12 at the MLB draft to come back to school. Javorsky Lane, as soon as he committed back in, I guess it was September, October, as soon as he committed, it was oh yeah, he's never going to play in college. There's just no chance there. And then it wasn't even really, a stressful thing. He was obviously coming to school here, it appears. Judah Otza, who I had heard was pretty dead set on coming to campus, but again, you can't trust everything you hear. Getting your top two high school signees, and not just your top two high school signees, guys. Arkansas didn't lose any other high school class, which sounds really good until you realize that it's a pretty small class that's not necessarily ranked super high. It's probably going to end up being in the 15 to 20 range. Maybe it bumps up with some other schools that lost some commits there, but you are keeping the entire thing intact. So that is not, notable there. Also Zeb Allen, the transfer center fielder from UCA, who we had heard maybe kind of thought he wanted to sign. He ends up going undrafted. He's going to make it to campus. That's awesome. Or maybe he signs a free agent deal. I don't know. Dawson Bryce, the Charlotte third baseman, he did not get drafted. He makes it to campus. That's a positive development. Manny Marin, who, again, when you lost Ben Cleary, you need a shortstop. Manny Marin being back is huge. He's definitely going to fill that void at shortstop. James DeCramer, who is pitching in the Cape Cod League right now, through 2 scoreless innings the other day. Had some good moments for Arkansas last year when he came back from injury. We'll see what kind of role he has. I just like that he's there for the depth. I like that he's there because he brings a lot of experience. He's got some decent stuff there as well. Could he maybe be a guy? I know he made some starts last year. He started some games at Oregon State. Could he maybe be in that starting mix? I don't necessarily. That's not necessarily at the top of my list, but I like having him back where you just have a little bit of stability, especially with a guy like Cooper Dossett getting drafted today, which, isn't the end of the world, but if you're going to lose someone like that who you would be bringing back basically for experience, getting a guy like James DeCramer back, I think, is a positive development. And your entire JUCO class, by the way, none of those guys got drafted as well. Not that it's this crazy long list, but one guy that we haven't talked about a lot because I frankly thought he was going to get drafted, Ned Frucci, who started his career at UC Irvine and then went and played 1 year at JUCO, 6'5", 215, was a starter at the JUCO level. I don't necessarily, I don't know if he projects as a weekend starter in the SEC, but a really talented arm who was in the top 500 of prospect boards. I think that's an interesting one, and so we'll see what they have planned for him. But I like getting all that JUCO class to campus because Micah Henson, the left-handed pitcher from Crowder, had he gotten drafted, I would have been a little bit bummed because Arkansas needs lefties. Holden Herring, who we had on the show last year, he goes undrafted. You didn't know if that would maybe be something he would explore. Luke Alexander from Johnson County Community College, he didn't get drafted as well. And so getting all those guys, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be, a group that carries the roster, but could one or two of those guys from that group emerge to be a legitimate weekend piece for you? We shall see. But without further ado, guys, I'm going to get into your chats. I don't have a producer here today, so it's just me. So it might take me a while to kind of sift through the chats and read them a little bit. But I'm counting on you guys to carry me through this a little bit. Before we do that, of course, I want to talk to you about HD Roofing and Construction, the sponsors of our heavy hitters here at Inside Arkansas. And there certainly were a lot of heavy hitters, 12 of which got drafted from the University of Arkansas. What a cool thing. And speaking of heavy hitters, Northwest Arkansas, especially Springdale and Farmington, man, it's storming on us like every week, it seems like, man. It seems like every week there's some type of crazy storm coming. It stormed a little bit last night in the Fayetteville area. All over the state of Arkansas, there's craziness. And plus, we're about to hit into like hurricane season. Tornadoes are always around. If you're not sure what this kind of stuff means for your roof, now is the time to find out. HD Roofing and Construction will come out, inspect it, and walk you through exactly what's going on. You can call their professional team that you can trust. If you're in the Northwest Arkansas area, you can call 479-957-1928. Or if you're in the Central Arkansas area, you can check out their Central Arkansas office at 501-428-0429. HD Roofing and Construction, the official sponsor of our heavy hitters here at Inside Arkansas. So let's hop into the chat real quick. We'll start, as we always do, with our super chats that get read first here. Ryan McDaniel, our guy, the most positive, loving Razorback fan. I've been very mean to Ryan lately, but to be fair, Ryan really tries to grind my gears. I feel like he definitely goes out of his way to try and rage bait me a little bit, and it works sometimes. But he says, "Love you," and I'm sorry, Andrew. Still best friends. We're getting there. We're getting there. I'll just say this, Ryan. The devil does not need advocacy. So I feel like all the time you're like, "Hey, I'm not trying to start an argument. I'm just playing devil's advocate." Why? Like, what is this? Like, he was, today he got everybody all riled up in the Discord, and he's like, "Well, after this draft, you can just tell Arkansas just doesn't have the NIL money. And, Dave is searching the clearance bin for transfers and all this." And I'm just like, how did you get that from Wills McGinnis getting drafted? Wills McGinnis, who, like, when Arkansas landed him, I don't remember people being like, hell yeah, they got this dude's a stud. I don't remember anybody even being that excited about it. Even when I had him on the show, I had the dude on the show. None of you watched the damn show. Like, I had him for an interview, and then all of a sudden he gets drafted and it's like, oh, we're screwed, man. What are we going to do here? I think that's interesting, but, whatever. Ryan Baker wants to know, I think the biggest questions may be TJ Pompey and James DeCramer. Will they be back with the team, or is there a free agent signing in baseball? There is a free agent signing in baseball, and there are guys that do that. There's a lot of guys, a handful, that will be undrafted free agents, and some of them, by the way, go on to, like, have legitimate pro careers. I mean, Logan Maxwell a couple years ago, I was surprised he didn't get drafted, but he was a guy who actually made more money as an undrafted free agent than he had he gotten drafted as well. So there's definitely some people that cut deals. I remember a few years ago, Arkansas had this transfer, I forget his name, but it was this little lefty from South Carolina who I thought had a chance to be pretty good, and he had a bunch of injuries and stuff. He was like a closer at South Carolina who missed an entire year with injury. He transfers to Arkansas, and I felt pretty good about it. We go through the draft, and he goes undrafted. I'm like, hell yeah, that's going to be our closer. And then he signed a free agent deal. And I was like, what? Like, what the hell, man? I will say, Ryan, because that was pre-NIL a little bit. With today's state of college baseball, and specifically with Pompey. Now, with DeCramer, I don't know, because Arkansas has so many right-handed pitchers on their roster. It's not like they, need – there's not one single right-hander on the team outside of, maybe Malky that you'd be like, oh, they need this guy. So I don't know if Arkansas's coaching staff would be, going to James DeCramer's residence and like begging and getting on their hands and knees and being like, please come back. But I do think that they would like to keep him. I don't know why you wouldn't. I think they're pretty high on him for the most part. Like they enjoy being around him. They think he would have had a bigger role for them had he not gotten hurt. And so as a redshirt junior next year, I think he would be, a solid arm for Arkansas in some form or fashion. With TJ Pompey, if he signed a free agent deal, what that would signal to me would be that Arkansas did not make an effort to keep him, which would be kind of a questionable move, in my opinion, just given how things have played out and given that you lost potentially Cleary and McGinnis. Now, will they try and keep one of those guys? I don't know. But I think if someone signs a free agent deal outside of a senior, obviously if you're a senior, like Mike Anu, for example, I was bummed that Mike Anu didn't get drafted today because I thought he had a real chance, and that would have been 13 guys get drafted, been pretty cool. And he was ranked on some boards, so I was a little bit surprised. Mike Anu doesn't have any eligibility left. So, like, he's obviously just going to, if he's going to continue his career, it's going to be signing a free agent deal. If you're not a senior and you sign a free agent deal, that tells me that you didn't really want to play college baseball. And so if either of those guys do, then, all right. But I wouldn't necessarily expect that to happen. And I would be a little bit surprised, but you never know. We will see. And of course, some of this is going to come out pretty quickly. You know what I mean? So, you guys let me know if you guys see something on Twitter where you're like, hey, James DeCramer and the Diamondbacks just agreed to a deal. Just let me know. We shall see. I see a chat here from Kyle who says, hey, Andrew, I was wondering if you had any potential names that fell out of the draft who Arkansas can pursue to fill up some potential gaps in their roster now. So I'll address the second part of that question first, because you say potential gaps in the roster. And I'm not saying Arkansas's got a loaded roster. In fact, I would say that, like, as it stands right now, I would definitely not say that this roster is like on par with what they had in 2025. I think it's definitely better than what they had last year, but I don't see a ton of like huge holes in the roster. In fact, like in the outfield, Arkansas's kind of got a little bit of a logjam with Vasco there, Allen there, Brenton Clark, Carter Rutenbar, Christian Turner, Javorsky Lane, Judah Ota, Lincoln Boyle. That's a lot of guys that can play outfield. So I don't think Arkansas is going to be like in the mix for any transfer outfielders. Infield, you can never have enough infielders. But like, you really think about it, at third base, potentially, you might have Dawson Bryce, TJ Pompey, a couple of the, because you got two freshmen in Spencer Browning and Dylan Cheek. I don't know where they're going to end up in the infield, but they can kind of be backups at any of these spots. At first base, maybe Dawson Bryce's guy that they project to start there. You've got Reese Robinette, who I know is not necessarily a fan favorite anymore these days, but he's still around. And then in the middle infield, I think Manny Marin's like for sure your starting shortstop. I don't really see any debate there. Dude's going to be a stud defensively, especially at shortstop. You've got Nolan Souza. Pompey could potentially slide over there as well. Dawson Bryce, by the way, has also played some shortstop. I know I kind of listed him at third base, first base, and potentially shortstop. And then you've got those two infielders as well, two freshman infielders as well. They could certainly like use an addition, but I think if they were going to have an addition, Kyle, I think it would probably be someone that's just, kind of like last year, and I'm not trying to put this guy down, but last year they landed Brendan Kleiman. You guys remember the backup catcher who ended up not really playing much. I think he got banged up a little bit, but he was a catcher from Eastern Michigan who was just like a guy looking to play one more year of college baseball, wasn't looking to start anywhere, just kind of wanted to have one more year before his coaching career started. I think if they were going to add an infielder, it would probably be someone along those lines, because I think in the starting lineup, there's not like a ton of open spots there. Now on the roster, because we mentioned it earlier, if there were a spot where it's like, man, they need to make an addition, I think it would be on the pitching front. The problem is the thing that they need is starting pitching, and I don't see who that would be. Perhaps there's somebody that I just have overlooked completely. I did see, by the way, a left-handed pitcher from Georgia who like randomly today tweeted that he's in the portal. I don't know if he's already in the portal or if he just is trying to enter after it's already closed. I don't know, but a big lefty that throws 98, from Georgia, who's been banged up in his career. Like maybe that's, in addition, they'd go out and try to get a lefty. I'll have to get back to you later this week on, and sift and see. Cam Johnson from Oklahoma was a guy that I was starting to get a little excited about. I'm like, man, if he goes undrafted, he's in the portal. That could be an intriguing one. I think he got drafted in like the 15th round. So maybe Arkansas could get into that mix there. He didn't fall out of the draft, but maybe that's a bidding war that Arkansas would like to get into, and maybe it's a worthwhile adventure there. But I genuinely don't know who that would be, Kyle. But again, the draft, happened in real time just now. So I'll probably have a better answer for you a little bit later in the week. I see my boy Nathan Oliver just bringing the great chats as always, who said, I saw Nathan Oliver. If you scroll up at the top of this chat, was just going crazy. About how bad this was. And he said, we've lost our entire high school class, which is pretty funny considering Arkansas literally did not lose a single high school kid. Pretty funny there. Cold Steel Rain says, key players being drafted round 11 and later is big for getting most, if not all of them, to campus. I would push back just a little bit because, rounds 11 and 12 in particular, as I mentioned earlier, that's not really around a range of the draft where teams just kind of don't care. You know what I mean? Dylan Grego was right there in that same range. I believe Justin Thomas last year was in that same range. That's usually a spot where teams are looking to get those guys. They're not just taking flyers. Once you get after the 15th round or so, that's where you really get into the range where you might just kind of if Javorsky Lane, it wouldn't have surprised me at all if Javorsky Lane had been drafted in the 19th round, just as some team that was oh, hey, we know this kid kind of wanted to sign. Let's see if we can maybe sway him last minute and we've got some money left over. That would be that kind of situation. I don't think that McGinnis and Cleary in particular, and probably not Diaz. I hope Arkansas can maybe get one of those guys back. And if they could get one, I think that Diaz would definitely be the one. I'd love McGinnis. I'd gladly welcome McGinnis, but given where he got drafted, I don't think that's necessarily a high possibility. Diaz would be the one, but I think you would be lucky, and I do mean lucky, to get one. And if you got two, if Arkansas got two of those three guys back, I would turn the gun and be man, this is the greatest draft of all time. But I think if you can get one, I would feel pretty good there. Dylan Turley here says, I think Souza could have a breakout year. I want to tell you guys a funny story. So yesterday I was just minding my business. The draft was going on. I think the draft had maybe concluded at this point, but I was getting ready for a fun night, getting ready for the McGregor fights, doing my thing. And Curtis sent me a screenshot from the basketball portal chat where there was some guy that was complimenting Curtis. And he was Curtis, man, you do such a good job. You don't sunshine pump. You tell it how it is. And you really give it to us straight and you tell the truth. And man, I really appreciate you for doing that. And then he was Andrew, you need to pay attention to how Curtis does it. So Curtis sent it to me jokingly and was what'd you do, bro? What happened? And so I reached out to the guy because I was hey, damn, I hear you, but what did I say that you didn't like or whatever? And he just kept kind of going off. He's well, you're just a sunshine pumper. You say all this and you keep lying to us and trying to fill our head. I'm just oh, damn. I'm all right, well, tell me specifically what it was. And he was well, you think Nolan Souza would have a great year if he came back? And I'm that's what you're upset about? And listen, Souza's certainly there's no doubt about it. Souza's been at Arkansas for 3 years. It hasn't gone the way that we thought it could, especially early in his freshman year. I mean, this is a guy that showed some flashes. I mean, he was hitting middle of the order as a true freshman, DHing every day. Matter of fact, during his freshman season, he was better than Ryder Helfrich. Now, we knew Helfrich was going to eventually turn into a stud, and we knew he was going to be a dude. Out of their freshman years, Souza was the guy that performed better. I mean, he hit 7 home runs. I think he hit about 255, 260. Wasn't a guarantee that he was going to be a great player, but we felt like that was a nice little launching pad for him to improve throughout his career. And then it just didn't really happen. And then obviously gets banged up during the 2025 year, has a long recovery. And I do think last offseason, because, he obviously wasn't allowed to do much up until, I think it was around December is when he first started being able to throw a baseball. Wasn't able to see live pitching until about mid-January. Did that affect him? Did he have full strength in his shoulder? I don't know. But I do think Souza was a guy that, we just kind of keep waiting on that big breakout. He did hit better in SEC play. I thought he was better down the stretch for Arkansas, and he finished the year swinging the bat pretty well. I would like to see what senior year Nolan Souza would be like. Now, is he a guy that you throw in the 3-hole? Probably not. He's probably in a perfect world, probably going to hit 6th or 7th in the lineup. But he's a stolen base threat, versatile defender, could play 2nd, 3rd, 1st. Maybe they'll throw him in the outfield. I don't know. Has some power. Just we haven't seen a ton of it. Could he be a 10 to 12 home run guy? That would be kind of the big quest I would like to find out for Nolan Souza, but I think he would be a guy that would be like, man, I would love to get that guy back just to see what you got there. And according to one random guy in the Discord, that was me sunshine pumping. So I apologize if you guys did interpret what I just said as sunshine pumping. Ryan wants to know, what kind of impact could Lane and Ota have? So it's interesting, man, because part of why, a lot of times with these incoming freshmen and you think, oh, these guys will probably sign. It's not that they don't want to come to school or that it's like, they hate the logo or whatever. I think a lot of times these incoming freshmen, specifically position players, it's really hard to get everyday playing time as a true freshman in the SEC. And so had Javorsky Lane wound up signing, I think that would have been the big thing is like, well, Arkansas went out because Javorsky Lane's a guy that could catch, could play outfield. I don't know what personally, I haven't spoken to the kid. I don't know what his mindset is necessarily in terms of what position he wants to play, but I could see how Arkansas going out and getting Nolan Traeger, retaining Carter Rutenbar, having another freshman in the class and Max Holland, I could see that of maybe being a thing where Javorsky Lane could maybe be a little bit like turned off by that. But he's also such a good athlete. I think Lane is the type of guy that what makes him intriguing, one, because I think there's just a very high ceiling. I think he's a mature kid. I think he's talented, well-rounded. Like I think he obviously has a good pedigree with his dad being a great athlete. Like I think he's a guy that just checks a lot of boxes to where I think he's going to end up being a pretty good player when it's all said and done, and could play outfield, could help you behind the plate, could play first base. I think that's something that they might explore a little bit with him. Do they want to get creative because he's an athletic enough kid? Do they want to say, hey, let's maybe try him at third base? I don't know. I think outfield would probably be the way to go. And Ota, by the way, of course, is also an outfielder. He's 6'5" and has the athleticism to play center field, which I think is going to be huge for Ota because I think, you can never have enough outfielders, but if you can play center field, especially at his size and just his overall physical tools, I think that's definitely going to be helpful for him. And for what it's worth, Zeb Allen could play center field. Christian Turner could play center field. Brenton Clark could play center field. I don't know if any of those guys are necessarily a guarantee. And so what happens if Judah Ota shows up and he's your best defender in center field? I think that would be maybe his path to, making some noise as a freshman. And, of course, by the way, with Kahio Aloy being drafted, DH is now wide open. And now maybe that DH winds up being one of these infielders because they slide someone in. Maybe that DH winds up being Carter Rutenbar, who DH for Arkansas a little bit, bounced around the infield, bounced around the outfield as well. I don't know, but I think for all these freshmen, I think that would probably be where I have my eyes on. And really, you just got to see kind of where they're at. We'll kind of find out when we get a look at those guys in fall practice. With Ota, the tools are really, really there, like really loud, raw power, really good speed and athleticism, especially for his size. I mean, he's 6'5" and can really run. There's just not that many people that fit that kind of criteria. I do think Ota is probably going to be a little bit more of a slow burn in terms of his development. Like I would be a little bit surprised if he just showed up on campus and was ready to hit SEC pitching with no problems at all. I think Lane is probably the safer bet to like be ready to roll day one. I think he's faced a lot of really good competition in high school, just a mature kid, wise beyond his years. I'd be interested to see, if either of those guys are going to make this thing a little bit interesting, which that's what you got to do with these programs. You have a plan a little bit, but you need as much depth as possible. You need those young cats pushing the envelope a little bit. I think both those guys, and I think Spencer Browning is a very talented player. I think he's got a lot of potential. I think he could be a guy that could push some guys in the infield. I think some of the pitchers in this freshman class, all of which now, by the way, have made it to campus. I think that's definitely an intriguing proposition. Cold Steel Rain says we needed pitching more than anything, and we added about 10. And this is right, and I do agree with this. And that's the thing is, like, I don't know exactly the roles. I think we can have these conversations of what roles guys go into for the next 7 months or whatever. Arkansas does have a lot of depth. That's the one thing they objectively improved on in the pitching department is just the depth. I mean, you added more transfers in this class than you've ever added before. I think a lot of these guys that didn't necessarily pop as freshmen, Mark Brissy had some moments, but didn't really pop as a freshman. Jordan Martin, we didn't get to see much of him as a freshman. Luke Cornelison, decent moments, but didn't really pop as a freshman. Peyton Lee, Ty Briscoe. I mean, really any of these guys, I think all of them have a chance to, Brissy's been borderline dominant the last couple outings there in the Cape. He's starting to really – it seems like the light bulb is kind of going off for Mark Brissy. So I'm excited to see what that group, if they all kind of take a step forward. You brought in 3 freshmen from that same class from the transfer portal in Niswanger, who I'm really high on, Ridge Harvey, who I think is going to be really solid for you, and Connor Udlin from Houston. I think can 1 or 2 of those guys really be a weekend guy for you? That's going to be interesting. And they brought in some like legit, I think Krenzel is a guy that certainly figures into the weekend mix there in the pitching staff. I love what Jackson Kersher's done out in the Cape as well. He's been pretty dominant. There's a lot of options. And where do they all fit? Where do they all go? Because you can kind of add in Cole Gibbler, James DeCramer, Malky. You can kind of add to that list a little bit. But I think Arkansas's got the number of guys. Like, I don't think there's going to be a situation where we're like, damn, there's only 5 guys we trust. I think it's more likely that Arkansas has like a 10 to 12-man mix where the starters kind of shuffle around a little bit. That's kind of what my worry is at the moment. But I do think they're definitely going to have a good chance to have a lot of depth in the pitching staff. And then David here says, final pitch. Did he ever throw an actual pitch? He did. He threw 14 innings. And yeah, this is, if you ever needed a reminder that the draft is not a meritocracy, Carson Wiggins very much is that. Because, and listen, I'm not trying to knock Carson Wiggins at all. I'm not going to carry this like grudge around with me whatsoever. We spoke about the situation. I will also say for this, because I know there was a lot of discussion about this yesterday. I think Arkansas handled the situation as well as they could have, in the way that, one, you really needed to at least reach out and make sure, because Carson Wiggins is such a talent. There's really not a guy you can compare him to in college baseball in terms of like the ceiling of a starting pitcher that can throw 102. Like, there's just not a guy walking around like that in high school, college, really anywhere. So to kind of make it available to him to where, hey, if you want to come back, this is the place to do it. Keep that relationship there a little bit. Also have an offer on the table in case he doesn't get what he wanted in the transfer in the draft, but also prepare accordingly. Go out and get other starting options. Go out and get depth. Keep recruiting and doing what you've got to do, which Dave spoke about not too long ago. And Arkansas did that. I think the narrative that a lot of people were spinning yesterday is like, well, we sat around on Wiggins. We could have gotten some transfer pitchers. It's like, dude, they got 9. So it's like, well, were they supposed to get 12 transfer pitchers? Perhaps they could have, but it's like, man, it was going to be a little bit tough there, but very interesting. And I think Arkansas, again, I think it played out kind of the way it probably should have, where Arkansas made a push, but ultimately didn't bank on it. And so, yeah, I don't know what all the fuss really is about, other than just the bummer of like, man, didn't get to see what a full, healthy Wiggins would have looked like. And that does suck. And Jackson says, imagine having Wiggins and Dietz on the 2025 team. Certainly would have been nice. Now, they were both on it, and they both did technically pitch, but I know what you mean. Like, having those guys available, especially when you get to Omaha, and it's like, man, imagine if you had a couple of those guys available for some of those games against LSU. Would have been something for sure. I will say, and obviously not everybody was healthy, but after this draft has concluded, like I said, 7 first-round picks in the last 2 years. All of them were on that 2025 roster. If you go back and just Google Arkansas baseball roster 2025 and look at it top to bottom, it's the best that we've ever seen in Razorback program history. And it's just, obviously we'd have preferred a less talented team that won the national title, but objectively speaking, it's the most talented roster Arkansas has ever put together. Would have been nice to have some of those guys healthy. Even Parker Coyle was a guy that wasn't healthy, down the stretch in 2025 as well. It sucks, man. But so I don't know if I'm not saying we need to hang a banner, but I do think, because I remember saying that in 2025 where I'm like, man, I think this is the best roster they've ever had. And I remember people kind of not liking that. And people also thought that this past year's roster didn't have any talent on it. And then you have 12 guys drafted and break the school record. It just wish you would have gotten more out of the talent. That's definitely what you want. And then I see Jackson say Georgia had a lefty 97-99 entered today. Yeah, I forgot what is his name. I should have his name, but I just learned about his existence today. But yeah, so there's guys out there, and maybe Arkansas will try and make a push here or there, but we shall see. My guy L says, when are you going on vacation, Andrew? Safe travels and enjoy your much-deserved time off. Well, I don't know about much-deserved. But, yeah, I will be – so weirdly enough, the Bahamas does not count as my vacation because we're going to be working a little bit then. That is going to be like my little appetizer for vacation. But, yeah, I will get married on August 14th. And like I said, is that Friday? Do I have that date right? I should have that date right, definitely. Yeah, August 14th, next month on a Friday. I'll get married that day, and then we will fly out Saturday, and then we will stay 2 nights in Orlando, and then fly out to Italy. So I'll be in Italy and France from like August 18th to August 31st, just in time for week 1 of football. So I'll be out for a good bit during fall camp, but I will have pre-recorded baseball content that I am looking forward. I am kind of excited about it a little bit. So that will be fun. We'll keep you guys updated on that. And I'm not just going to go away completely. There'll still be a little bit of content. Ryan says, are we surprised Souza didn't get taken? I thought he had enough upside for a team to take a chance on him. Ultimately, I think once it got past a certain point, like once you got to that 12th, 13th, 14th round range, I think it just became a signability issue where teams weren't going to waste a draft pick. And so if they felt like, which Ryan Baker here says, I think Souza made it fairly obvious that he wanted to come back unless they drafted him in the top 10 rounds. And I think the same would apply for Dawson Bryce. In fact, Dawson Bryce used that exact terminology in his chat with Andrew Hutchinson, where he was like, man, most of the feedback I'm getting is after the 10th round, and after the 10th round does not entice me. It's definitely not something I'm excited about. So I don't know what that number was for Souza. I don't know what that range was, but I think once you got past a certain point, if Souza told MLB teams, hey, I'll sign no matter what, he 1,000% would have gotten drafted. But once you got past a certain point, it definitely would have been a waste of a draft pick, we think. I also don't know. I don't know also what that bag looks like for Nolan Souza or TJ Pompey in terms of them coming back, because who knows? Like, let's say, for example, Arkansas, because I know they dropped a decent bag to get TJ Pompey here last year, and let's say that the bag is $400,000. That's what TJ Pompey's going to make returning to Arkansas. Who's to say he didn't get called in the 15th round? And they're like, hey, we want to sign you for $250, and he's like, no, F off. Maybe that very well could have happened. Let's see. And then I see Cold Steel Rain says, round 11 picks have a $150K cap without team penalty. Good chance to get them back. Not great, but good. So I will say, again, this is true, but rounds 11 and 12 in particular, that's what I'm if you look at the history of rounds 11 and 12, it's like over 50% of the guys that get drafted in that range sign for overslot, especially if they are high school signees or draft eligible sophomores or juniors that have leverage, which Cleary has a couple years of leverage. McGinnis obviously has 2 years of leverage. They very much fit the criteria. Dylan Grego last year was a junior with leverage. They fit the criteria of guys who would sign for overslot. And so in that range, if over half the guys are signing for overslot, we can reasonably assume both of those guys would, if they agreed to deals that were overslot. And I will say, these teams don't draft guys and then start negotiating. Like, they talk to those guys, likely, if I had to guess, agreed on a number or at least a range. And so I don't think it's like a coincidence. Like, I don't think the Red Sox were just like, we'll draft Wills McGinnis without having any idea of whether or not they're going to sign him. And I would almost guarantee that number is going to be higher than 150. And again, some teams specifically draft accordingly so that they do have some money left over in their bonus pool. I would have to look at the Red Sox. Like, for instance, let me pull up the Red Sox draft real quick. So the Red Sox drafted, for example, in round 1, the Red Sox drafted the number 20 overall pick. It was a guy that was ranked 75. So that's a slot value of $4.37 million. They drafted a guy that was projected to go number 75. So that's probably a guy they're going to wind up signing for maybe half of that 4.7 mil. That gives them $2 million to work with in their bonus pool. And I think there's other examples of this. I haven't looked at the rest of this, but they also drafted a guy in round 3, pick number 96. He was projected to go 131. Doesn't sound like a huge deal, but if you're able to sign that guy to, let's say, $200,000 less than slot, that's now 200,000. You could go over that 150 cap, and maybe that's enough to get you Wills McGinnis. I don't know the numbers. We'll have to see what they are when they come out. But my point is that it's not like these teams are completely scared off by the bonus pool or scared off by some of these numbers. And most times, more often than not, they cut these deals before they draft these guys, for sure. And then Papa Dragon here says, I think they've insulated themselves enough to lose those infielders and be solid enough. Diaz getting drafted made me say a few profane words, though. No, I would agree. And it's not even that Diaz is like this can't miss monster of a player, but definitely a guy that, kind of fills not a need, but it's just a guy that brings a lot of stability. And I do think even with the infielders, with both Cleary and McGinnis, what they represented was stability. So whereas TJ Pompey and Nolan Souza are two guys that I like, two guys that I'm high on, they are a little bit more boom or bust. Now, could TJ Pompey end up being way better than Wills McGinnis was going to end up being? Possibly. I mean, he has that potential. I mean, he hit 15 home runs in the SEC. I think he hit 290 in SEC play this last year. I could see a senior year TJ Pompey having a nice year, but it's just a little bit, you're kind of banking on an increase in production. And with Nolan Souza, who hit 4 home runs last year, you're definitely banking on an increase in production, whereas it would have just been nice to have the options and the stability. And then, to get it back to Diaz, he's definitely one where, not that you can't find a player as good as Diaz, there's probably pitchers on the roster who could wind up being better than Diaz, but I definitely think he's one that it's going to be a little bit tougher to replace. And to your point, you at least have those replacements in place with Marin, with Souza, with Pompey, and I don't necessarily feel that way about Diaz. So I'm definitely on the same page with you there. And then Card Collect 91 says, "Loved the Mets taking 3 hogs. Woo damn pig." I like to see that, man. I like that. By the way, I think there was a Mets account that tweeted at me today, and they were like, "Did y'all hear that?" I don't know if there's a bird or some type of weird animal outside my house, but it's making a weird noise, and it really distracted me. I hope you guys didn't hear it. Actually, I hope you did, so you know that I'm not crazy, but that threw me off a little bit. But yeah, there's a Mets account that reached out and was like, "Hey, would love to have you on to talk about this Carson Wiggins situation." So I should be going on with them at some point, which I am looking forward to. But yeah, how about that? It seems like the Mets were just very high on the hogs with Carson Wiggins, Kahio Eloy, and Cooper Dawson. Interesting. JD Hog Fan says, "Does it seem DVH loses far more of his roster targets to the draft? I had heard Georgia wasn't losing any. Smart targeting." So I haven't looked at some of these other teams. I couldn't confirm or deny for you how many of these teams lost certain guys. I know LSU had like a mixed bag of like some of their guys made it that they weren't expecting, but they also lost a decent amount. Ultimately, JD, it's like it comes down to like, for example, Arkansas didn't lose any of their signing class out of high school, which is kind of it's rare for Arkansas and it's rare for most teams. They also didn't lose a ton of their returning players that, you could have, like we could have lost. You could have lost Souza. You could have lost Pompey. You could have lost DeCramer. You could have lost some of those guys. And then with your transfer class, Arkansas brought in 16, 17 transfers. There's not that many teams that brought in, even Georgia, last year brought in 24 transfers and did lose a few of those. But it's like when you have a class that large, it's pretty hard to come out unscathed. And I think in Arkansas's case, I don't know if it was like unsmart targeting. I think you have to do your risk assessment a little bit. And so with Cleary, I think Arkansas knew a couple weeks leading up to the draft, this one doesn't look super likely. So let's go out and get another shortstop, and you go out and get Manny Marin. I think if you look at what Arkansas did, I know you specifically are probably not going to believe this, JD, but I actually think they were kind of prepared for everything that played out, aside from maybe the McGinnis thing. Even though I will say, I remember talking to a guy on staff a few weeks ago, and he was worried about McGinnis. And I remember thinking, I'm like, I think he's just like, reverse psychology or like messing around a little bit. But he was like, "Oh, hope he makes it to campus." And I was like, dude, obviously McGinnis is going to make it to campus. But in hindsight, I'm like, damn, I guess he knew something. He knew something that I didn't. Crazy. What a crazy concept that they would know a little bit more. And I definitely think if you look around the country, again, I haven't specifically, the draft just ended. I haven't looked at everybody and what they did, but this isn't a unique issue to Arkansas. There's guys every year that seem to lose their roster targets. And the thing I would say for Arkansas is this year compared to last year, Arkansas had backup options. Whereas last year you lose Dylan Grego and you didn't really have a plan B and you wound up playing Camden Kojal at shortstop. This year they did have a plan B in place and are in a much better spot to kind of, weather that storm a little bit. Ryan Baker wants to know, would Vasco be interested in moving to first base? If we have 5 outfielders that are hitting, his size would be a wall over there. Definitely not a crazy thing. I have no idea in terms of what his willingness to do would be. I mean, he is 6'6", so it's like, if you're not open to playing first base, like what the hell? Because I mean, there's a lot of guys, and we've seen guys. I mean, our DVH has moved guys that are like not necessarily natural first basemen over to play first base. Hell, Tennessee a couple years ago moved Andrew Fisher over to play first base, and he was a first-round pick. So I would hope that AJ Vasco doesn't feel like he's like above it, especially if that ends up being how the roster shakes out, where maybe you don't feel great about what you have there with either Dawson Bryce or whoever. And maybe you do feel like, hey, Carter Rutenbar is just he's too good. We got to have him on the field. I guess he's also a guy that could play first. Or maybe Christian Turner takes a massive step and you're like, oh, crap, dude, we have to have Christian Turner in the outfield. We also have to have Zeb Allen in the outfield. We also have to have Javorsky Lane in the outfield. I think Vasco to first base could solve some of those issues, but we'll just have to see how it all plays out. But your head is definitely in the right spot for sure. And then Ryan here says that guy is Cole Gibler or Mark Brissy. I hope. I wonder if I'm assuming this is a reference to the starting rotation. Because I do think that's probably the most realistic thing. I don't think there's a guy out there in the transfer portal that you would be like, oh, this guy is a for sure, no doubt about it starter. In fact, one of the guys that people, were like a little bit bummed that Arkansas didn't get. I was also a little bit bummed was Thomas Allen from Louisiana Tech, who was a top 100 transfer. He wound up choosing Mississippi State over Arkansas. He was a top 100 guy and one of the top pitchers in the portal, a guy that we would have been happy to get. Even he wasn't even a starter at Louisiana Tech. So it's like far from a guarantee that he would have been like, had Arkansas landed Thomas Allen, I'm sure a lot of you would have been like, well, he's not a proven starter. And you would have been right. I think he's going to end up being a weekend starter, just like I also think Cole Gibler is going to end up being a weekend starter. But it's really hard to find dudes that are just, for sure, no doubt about it, dudes that are going to be weekend starters in the SEC. I mean, even if Gabe Gackle couldn't be a no doubt about it weekend starter in the SEC, it's going to be hard to find many of these guys that fit that criteria. Alan here says, if they plan to give Wiggins a bag to come back, will they reallocate that money to Diaz, McGinnis, and Cleary? And are there any top flight transfers on the boards? I'll have to do some more digging. I haven't seen many because there's just not that many transfers left, honestly. I would assume, and I don't know this for a fact, Alan, I would assume that AJ Vasco and Michael Malky both, who, by the way, didn't get drafted and didn't seem like they were even, like, it seems like they reached a point where they weren't even in negotiations with MLB teams. Vasco, we had heard all along that kind of like he wanted to come to campus. I would assume that both of those guys, specifically Malky, since he's a pitcher, I think they probably got some of that reallocated Wiggins bag, but it's a lot of money, not too far away from $1 million if I'm just being transparent with you guys. So I don't think it's a crazy concept, especially with the Diaz front, because he was drafted in the 14th round. So it's like, what is he realistically about to sign for in the 14th round? Maybe it is $300K. If it's $300K, I think Arkansas could maybe be in a mix to match that a little bit. I think that there's definitely something to that. And then Garrett says, am I the only one excited about Jordan Martin and Mark Brissy? I think they step up big time next season. You are not the only one excited, man. I think a lot of people should be, and I think a lot of guys are. To be fair, I think a lot of people are pretty high on Jordan Martin and definitely Brissy. I mean, Brissy's a dude that is – I'm not saying he's a guarantee, but I would be pretty surprised if Mark Brissy didn't take a noticeable step forward. And he, to be fair, has here in the last few weeks here in the Cape. Jordan Martin, I think his ERA is right around like the low threes in the Cape, getting a lot of quality experience there. And so that's definitely two guys that I think we're, are they going to be weekend starters? Maybe not, although Brissy, I think, had that potential. But I think those are guys that certainly, when you're thinking about next year's pitching, you definitely have to include those guys in your thought process. Let's see. And then Garrett also says Brenton Clark is your starting center fielder next year, in my opinion. I think that's probably a decent prediction. You guys know I'm like a huge Brenton Clark guy. I'm as high on Brenton Clark as one could be about a guy who has not played a single game of college baseball. But in all seriousness, like I think he's healthy. I also think from the timing wise, like he was already swinging the bat before the season ended. I like that he's got all off season to work on his game, work out, get bigger, get stronger, swing the bat a little bit. I think that's definitely a guy that people should not be overlooking for next year's roster. Big Donnelly says Malky, Gibbler, Kersher as a weekend rotation. This is interesting. Now, Kersher, I would maybe, to be honest with you, Big Donnelly, if I could make a phone call right now to the Bourne Braves, I would maybe say, hey, maybe give Kersher a start. He's been a lot of like 2 to 3 inning outings in the Cape, and we saw him get stretched out a little bit. I think he had a couple, maybe 1 or 2 3 inning outings this past year for Arkansas. I know that the Kersher camp would certainly like that. I think, because he's going to be a draft eligible guy next year. If Kersher could start a little bit and show that kind of capability, he does have 3 pitches and he does have a very firm fastball. It is a little bit of a high effort delivery there with Kersher, and the command would definitely need to clear up a little bit, but I don't think that's the craziest suggestion in the world. I have to think about that one for a little bit, but I don't think that's a crazy thing. But I also think if he ends up being like a legit closing option, he might be too valuable, honestly, to do that. Real quick, I'll get out of here in just a second, but Braden Kirby says we need an update on summer ball stats for all current players / transfers. So I'll do a little bit more of a deep dive later, but I will say off the top of my head, I know Carter Rutenbar is having a great summer. Like he's hitting well over 300. His on base percentage is damn near 500. He's not striking out much at all. I think he's riding like a 10-game hit streak right now, playing some catcher, playing some first base, playing some outfield. He's been really good. Christian Turner's a little bit banged up right now, but Luke Cornelisson's been playing the field and hitting. He's been doing a pretty good job. I think his ERA's somewhere in like the 4 to 5 range, but his strikeout numbers have been really good. Off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure Jordan Martin's ERA is 3.12, which I think is he's thrown 8 2/3 innings and he's given up 3 runs. So, once he gets to 9 innings, it'll be 3. Kersher has a 0.00 ERA. I know that for a fact. I know he has not given up an earned run, and that's like on like 13, 14 innings. Like he's gotten a decent little sample size of work there. Brissy's numbers as a whole aren't crazy because his first couple of outings were rough. And so I don't know what happened there necessarily, but his last couple outings, he had a scoreless, I think he threw 3 scoreless innings a couple of weeks ago, threw 3 2/3 of 1 run, 6 strikeouts the other day. He's starting to heat it up a little bit. I'll do a little bit more of a deep dive into that in the week, in later on in the week, but some good stuff going on there, man. Well, guys, I think this is the end of our road here. We've gone a little bit over an hour. Definitely, which by the way, actually, no, I can't say that on the air. But appreciate you guys for tuning in. I hope that this makes you not even necessarily feel better, because I hope you guys don't feel like I'm over here trying to sell you like a false bill of goods and being like, hey, everything's awesome for Arkansas. There were some negative developments. There were some positive developments, a little bit of everything in between. But I hope that this stream at least gave you a little bit of clarity in terms of what the situation is for Arkansas, what we should expect with the roster. And we're going to keep the conversation going, man. We're going to continue to break this down. I think on tomorrow's episode of the show, I'll probably just reset the roster and kind of show the depth chart of, hey, here are the infielders they have, corner infield, middle infield. Here are the outfielders, catchers, all that fun stuff. But overall, I think the draft was pretty solid. It wasn't great. It definitely could have gone much better for Arkansas. It also could have gone much worse, if I'm being honest with you. And so, all in all, you're always kind of bracing for impact. I'm not saying this was the best we could have hoped for, but it definitely, again, there was a path to it being a lot worse. Like if you had lost one of Vasco and Malky, it would have been pretty tough to spin that and be like, no, that's not bad, But really, outside of McGinnis, man, I think things kind of went fairly chalk for the most part in the draft. And so, yeah, I'll take it. It's always a stressful thing. And when you're a program like Arkansas, not only are you always going to have a ton of guys get drafted, like they had 12 this year, 11 last year, you're always going to have guys on your teams getting drafted. You're also going to always have your high school signees getting looked at. So for Arkansas to come out unscathed there, and in this day and age, it's going to be hard to recruit a transfer class full of guys that aren't draft eligible. And so you're definitely going to be kind of sweating it out a little bit. So get used to this, man. This is just how it's going to be year in and year out. And maybe they'll just have an MLB lockout for 4 years, so we don't have to worry about this next year. But until next time, it's been another award-winning edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. Hope you guys will continue to tune in as we break this roster down and give you the details and rundown throughout the week. We'll definitely keep you guys updated on the summer ball front. But have a great Sunday night, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.